How's it going, Helldivers? Patch day is here, and with it are some pretty meta disrupting massive changes to some of the best and most used primary and support weapons, orbital stratagem buffs, and the not so great debuff on one of our favorite support backpacks. There's also some bug and hotfixes along the way, and a pretty disruptive change to a popular mission strategy as well. In this video, I'll be testing out all the new changes in-game and giving my thoughts and feedback. Please let me know what you think about it in the comments down below, and as always, thanks so much for watching. First, let's hell dive into the weapons. The railgun was dramatically nerfed, and in short, it really didn't need to be. Pre-patch, the railgun was a versatile, one-size-fits-all, armor-piercing and damaging machine. It really gave you the chance in fighting against some more tougher armored enemies, such as Hulks and pesky chargers, and even taking out Bile Titans in a pinch. Post-patch though, it feels more like a heavier burden to carry around. You can get around the armor penetration nerf by using the unsafe mode. However, it's a lot more dangerous and you sacrifice that versatility and the mobility by doing that. You're locked into holding it down and being careful how long you hold it down, or you just end up exploding. One thing you can't get around, however, is the decreased damage to enemy durable parts. This means unarmored charger legs and even the Bile Titan heads, and overall it makes the gun much heavier to carry around and less impactful. To tested out the armor piercing damage against a charger and took 4 or possibly more shots in order to take out its leg armor, and with a 20 round magazine, assuming you miss one every now and then, you can only take out about 4 chargers or so if you're lucky, and it doesn't feel as strong anymore to carry around, especially when you have to reload in between. 4 shots, 5 shots, that's a lot of time, especially in Helldive difficulty. Most people loved using the railgun, not because it was overpowered, but because it worked really well. And it kind of was the staple. It was the example of what a good gun would be that you could bring into almost any situation. And with a lot of the current weapons being a bit underwhelming and not that many armor piercing options, the railgun was kind of the go-to, and it felt like it should have been the mold and the example of the solution. And we should be bringing up and buffing other weapons, not nerfing the ones that are working. The Breaker also received some huge nerfs, decreasing magazine capacity from 16 to 13 per mag and increasing the recoil from 30 to 55, making it much harder to continuously shoot. This overall is a fairly significant nerf, and the Breaker seemed to be the go-to weapon for many Helldivers, not because it was overpowered, but simply because it worked well. Removing those extra shots really does feel like it matters, and I'm just barely behind in holding off some of the hordes of enemies that I'm facing. Those 3 extra shots that you're missing, for some reason, it's a lot. It feels really impactful. And this may of course be a personal skill issue, but I think skill can only take you so far against seemingly insurmountable odds. And people like the Breaker because it was easy to get and use, easy to clear mobs with. There's not too many options for primaries that do that effectively, and it wasn't because it was overpowered. I think it's just because it felt effective and fun to use. Next up is the Breaker Spray and Pray. Now it has armor penetration. Before, this gun, even on the smaller enemies, just didn't feel like it did much at all, and now it still kind of feels like it doesn't do much at all. This gun is kind of in a weird spot when I was using it. I was fighting some of the Hive Guards with it and using the entire mag, and it just bounced off their armor on the front of them, which makes me think, what was the point of adding in all this armor penetration? You also removed about 3 shots per magazine, which makes it even less likely for you to be able to gun down a horde of mobs. And with the increased fire rate and all the changes, it just doesn't feel like anything significant happened to this weapon. You just increase the pellets from 12 to 6 per shot and decrease the magazine size from 32 to 26, which overall just doesn't feel that impactful. And so the Breaker Spray and Pray, I feel like nothing really happened too much for this, but I could be wrong, and I might need to test it out a bit more. Next up is the Punisher. Shotguns have been in a fairly weird state, as most Helldivers I run into seem to not really like them too much, although the Punisher was a big difference for a lot of people. The low fire rate from reloading and limited ammo capacity didn't feel like they were useful in taking care of swarms of enemies, with you often running out right in the middle of a massive fight. It is satisfying that at close range you can just nail these enemies. And now with the magazine size being upgraded by a massive 33%, which is huge, that stagger increase as well, it makes your survivability so much stronger, especially against stalkers that pop up out of stealth and close range and just try to sneak up on you. One thing unrelated too is I feel like there's more stalker nests or more stalkers in general, but that also could be me. But it feels like some enemies got buffed in hidden ways, but I could just be crazy. The flamethrower went through some massive changes that make it a go-to for most missions, especially in the suicide mission to Helldiver difficulty. It feels like you need this because it's so much harder to get through most enemies' armor penetration that the 50% damage increase on the flamethrower is just incredibly good. I was able to kill chargers with the flamethrower in about 6 to 10 seconds just using the full charge of the mag on him, and it felt great. It felt amazing. Even when you tap the button and you're able to hit some of the enemies and they stay lit on fire for about 2 seconds or so, that's incredible damage over time. The only problem with this is with the energy shield nerf that we're going to talk about in a little bit, enemies like hunters are able to jump up while on fire and go onto you, which can then put you into fire. And if you're able to put a charger on fire as well, and they charge you and you have no shield, you'll also be put on fire. And so I feel like these two kind of went hand in hand. Although you did upgrade the flamethrower, you did decrease a bit of survivability, and even increased heavy armor doesn't save you from being burned. So overall, net positive for the flamethrower. I think we're going to see a lot more use from Helldivers with this weapon, but survivability again is not going to be too incredible, especially since the more you use fire, the more you're likely to get burned. Next up, the energy shield backpack. This one is probably my most disliked change in this entire patch. The energy shield backpack felt perfect before. It was just in a right state where if you had enough skill and you knew how to weave in and out of combat, especially when the shield was down and up, then you're able to survive even when there's bile titans spewing at you, even when there's a ton of chargers, hunters, even stalkers. You could just barely survive against 2 stalkers if you played correctly. But now it feels like a significant nerf. The energy shield backpack feels like it's not as strong, not just because of the decreased charge time, but I feel like it just isn't as strong in general. More hits are able to get through the shield, and it just feels like the capacity was decreased. Alongside that, the regen speed, which is the nerf that they discussed, 5 to 6 seconds or so, in my opinion, before your shield comes back. An additional 5 to 6 seconds, by the way, so that makes it around 10 to 12. And that feels so much, it feels so difficult. When you're in Helldiver difficulty, especially, 5 seconds, 2 seconds is life or death. So a 5-second decrease on the shield, I found myself dying so much more than I'm used to, especially I tested this out on level 7, which is suicide mission difficulty, not even Helldiver, and I was dying left and right, even with the energy shield on. And so it doesn't feel as viable anymore, but then again, enemies are just so strong to the point that you kind of need even that little bit of energy you get from it, but then you're sacrificing a backpack slot now by not using it, so it makes people want to use rovers and supply packs and other things a bit more. And overall, it's a nerf I really feel like they didn't need to do. I think they should have just focused on buffing more weapons rather than decreasing what survivability and things are working right now. Laser cannon received increased armor penetration and also increased versatility and an increase in your damage to unarmored parts. These are all efficient in theory, but in practice I was not able to use the laser cannon to the potential that they described. It was great against unarmored mobs, of course, like I mentioned, but the increased armor penetration didn't feel like it had any difference. There was a time when I was shooting a charger that got stuck on a rock, and it took 2 to 3 full mags, and I still didn't even get through its legs. And I also tried it again on another charger who wasn't on a rock, just to make sure it wasn't a glitch, and I just could not get through that leg armor. So I don't know what they were talking about with the increased armor penetration in this aspect. Although I was able to snipe some eggs from far away rather easily, so that might speak to its armor penetration a little bit, because the eggs do have a bit of armor. But overall, it doesn't feel like this is going to be a game-changing weapon buff that's going to make more Helldivers want to use the weapon. 380mm and 120mm orbital barrages. They increase the duration of these barrages and also decrease the fire spread. Another one that, in theory, sounds awesome and amazing, but in practice, when I threw these down, the spread still felt quite large, to the point that I was at least 50 meters away from where I threw it, and still the first or second barrage hit me directly and left me in a lot of confusion, because if they fixed up the spread from that, I wonder what it was before, since I didn't really use these as much. And so far, it is a net positive. There's nothing wrong with this. More duration and decreased spread means you can be a lot more accurate and more tactical with throwing this down. So overall, a net positive. But for me, I feel like the stratagems for the Eagles are still always going to be on top, especially with the hanger upgrade, adding a +1 armament. You can have 2 500-kilogram bombs with a low cooldown that's absolutely devastating. Overall, the Eagles feel like they're a bit stronger in my opinion, but these are welcome changes. Anything to help increase armaments and make it a bit easier for everyone to use.
Ooh.
Now, they finally fixed the armor rating values, so we're not going to see as many Helldivers rocking the light armor, although I still recommend you to rock the light armor. In testing out the heavy armor, I only have this heavy armor, which gives 150 armor and some explosion resistance. And in going down, I was able to probably tank 2 or 3 more shots than usual in the suicide mission difficulty, probably even less in Helldiver, but it didn't make too much of a difference, because the survivability in this game, I feel like, relies on your mobility. And being in heavy armor, you have half as much, probably even less, because you aren't using light armor anymore. So you have 1/3 as much of stamina regen, and you have even less speed, and you aren't able to outrun the enemies in time. If you're able to somehow take off the horde in front of you and deal enough damage, possibly with a friend or two, then I could see this being viable. Maybe even against the automatrons, this would be a good pick for the explosion resistance, giving you a bit more survivability, since they don't tend to come up to you as closely, and they're more of ranged fighters. But overall, the armor value didn't seem that strong against the Terminids, and I probably wouldn't recommend heavy armor in its current state for survivability. So that I don't keep this video on for too long, there are a few things that I haven't covered yet, such as the firestorms and different environmental effects, also flashlights and a little bit more of hotfixes. I'll put a link towards the patch notes in the description. But the last thing I want to cover are the Eradicate mission changes. A lot of people used to use Eradicate missions to get fast experience, fast credits, and also fast badges, but now they've kind of changed that, and they pretty much doubled the difficulty on all levels. You used to only need to do around 250, maybe 350 or so around the level 7 to 9 ranges. Now it's looking like you have to finish around 400 to 500, which is much more difficult. And it also does seem, I mentioned earlier, that some of the monsters, enemies do hit a bit harder than I remembered, or perhaps it's just due to the shield not being as strong anymore. But either way, this is pretty much going to kill farming in a way that you aren't going to be able to finish it in 3 to 4 minutes, and it's probably going to average around 10 with a well-rounded group if you really want to do it. Anyhow, that's everything that I'm covering for today. Thank you guys so much. This video did take me a little bit of time to edit and go through everything, because I wanted the visuals to be accurate to what I was saying. Thank you for your patience, and I hope you did enjoy the video, and if you did, please leave a comment down below, and looking forward to posting some more videos in the future, so please stay tuned. Thanks again for watching, everyone, and I hope you have a great rest of your dives. See you later, and good luck.